When I was 11 years old, I had started volunteering at an assisted living community down the street. It was there that I met Libby. Libby was 95 years old, and I learned about Libby that she had been hit quite literally by a bus just a few years earlier. I also came to learn about Libby that she had been hit by a figurative bus as well. The death of her adult son by suicide. I didn't know what to say or how to ask about him, so I didn't. Fast forward many years later, after meeting so many other amazing, strong women like Libby in their 80s and 90s, and I too am hit by the grief bus. My daughter died. By some accounts in the story of longevity, she should have lived until she was 150, but instead she died. My life and my work have taught me that when it comes to aging, when it comes to longevity, we have to talk about our losses, the meaning that they bring, the perspectives they shift for us, and how our losses accumulate over time. Especially over the next 20 years in the United States, talking about longevity in a way that acknowledges the amazing opportunities that come with it and the deep losses won't just be a nice thing to do. We can't afford not to. Let me explain why. You might have heard longevity is having a moment, and it's over 100 years in the making. For many groups in the United States, life expectancy has doubled over the last century. Thanks to advances in public health and medicine, innovations in science and technology, and attention across sectors, many people are now living with more years. In some cases, as much as 30. Today's longevity paradigm presents a much more nuanced set of variables for us to consider than in years past, when the framing was more around retirement planning only. Now we think about questions like, what might I be doing in the future? Where might I be living? How might I be getting around? How might I be getting care? Should I need care? And oh yes, how to fund my aging future and leave a legacy behind, if possible. These days, in many Western societies, including the United States, there are two reigning schools of thought when it comes to aging and longevity. The first is that with more healthy years, we need to frame older adulthood as an amazing time, full of beautiful adventures and opportunities. Think learning and working through your 70s. Think traveling and starting new passion projects in your 80s and 90s. Think pickleball. The other school of thought is that with aging and longevity, we need to run fast, away. It's something that we need to fear. We can fight our wrinkles. We can battle disease. We can chase that fountain of youth that's always just out of reach. We can overcome aging. In both cases, these longevity stories conveniently allow us to avoid a vital truth, and we all know it. Aging, living, is hardly a straight and narrow path. It's a winding road and a series of adventures. I want to tell you a story about two women who met in a group. Not just any group, a write your own obituary group. Brilliant, right? Everyone in the group had come together by virtue of their own losses. They had been inspired to plan ahead, to literally write their own legacies. There were two women in the group who stood to gain far more from participating than they ever could have realized. They fell in love, and they got married. as one of the women said to me, "This is so unexpected. It changes everything." As their story shows us, longevity is full of opportunities. It's also full of losses. When we talk about aging, when we talk about longer lives, we have to talk about both. Here's why. The more we get to live, the more we have to lose. From the death of loved ones, to the failure of businesses, to family and relationships gone south, loss and grief are all around us. And yet we refuse to talk about it. It is still so stigmatized in our society. It makes sense. The longer we live, statistically, the more likely we are to lose family members, friends, other kinds of influential people in our lives. But understand that when I say we need to talk about loss when we talk about longevity, I don't just mean people or beloved animals who are as close as family. I mean other kinds of losses too. We need to talk about things like loss of purpose, identity, connections. I want to tell you another story. This one is about my friend Jane. Just a couple of weeks ago, Jane celebrated her 101st birthday with family and friends. About 15 years ago, Jane woke up one day with muffled hearing after an illness. That muffled hearing snowballed into permanent hearing loss. Jane, like many people, experienced late onset hearing loss. Did you know, actually, that about 65% of people over the age of 70 in the United States and 97% of people over the age of 90 in the United States have late onset hearing loss? It's a very, very common type of loss that becomes more common as people age. It's also a great example of a loss that can beget other types of challenges, like social isolation, for instance. And it's a great example of a loss that can bring about what's called disenfranchised grief, grief that isn't generally socially acknowledged or validated. Jane's story is one story, but there are so many others. If we think about work and retirement, for instance, we know that many people retire happily and willingly. Many people don't, however. Did you know that rates of substance abuse and depression spike in the 1 to 3 years after a formal retirement? And did you know that many people these days are actually finding themselves in retirement rather than declaring themselves retired, whether that's due to health issues for themselves or a loved one, or ageism shutting them out of the workforce? Each of these experiences come with grief. We have to talk about them. Here's some more food for thought as we think about different kinds of losses that we may experience over time. What happens for the older caregivers who no longer have someone to care for, either because their loved one has died or grown up? What happens for the older singers who can no longer sing in the choir, or the older volunteers who can no longer tutor in schools because they can't get there easily and they feel bad asking for a ride yet again? These are losses. We have to acknowledge them, because if we don't, the grief often goes unacknowledged or minimized. You might be thinking, okay, got it. Loss, grief, all around us, light topic, thanks. So what? Well, what if I told you that if we collectively can commit to talking about loss, naming it in the new longevity paradigm, it won't just be comforting for us and for other people, it can actually be protective. Talking about our losses can shield us from cascading risks across mental, physical, and financial domains. Let's talk about money for a moment, shall we? You may have heard in the United States over the next 20 years there is an estimated $124 trillion expected to transfer hands within and across generations. You may have also heard that in the United States, over the next 35 years, rates of dementia are expected to double. What you may not have heard, however, is that in the 8 years preceding a formal dementia diagnosis, people can lose up to half of their wealth. Half. But you might ask, why? To which I would say, you guessed it, in part because of our refusal to talk about loss. Diagnoses of dementia either come too late to be meaningful for intervention or don't come at all. Many people may genuinely not recognize that changes that they see in their own or in their loved ones' judgment, memory, language, communication could be related to dementia. Chances are they may, and may be so afraid to name their fear that they don't say anything. But at what cost? We know from research that stronger mental health, which can come from more emotional support after a loss, can bring about more positive outcomes, things like lower rates of depression, lower rates of substance abuse and anxiety. We also know that stronger emotional support after a loss can create more protection against decline from conditions exacerbated by stress. Think diabetes, arthritis, heart disease. And finally, we know that stronger mental health through more emotional support can actually create buffers for us financially, maybe protecting us in some ways from things like financial exploitation, fraud, and addictive gambling. We have so much to gain by talking about our losses. We also know, as much as we all stand to gain by naming loss in the new longevity paradigm, women living longer in general than men tend to accumulate more losses and tend to quarterback losses more over time. Just think what might be possible for our health, for our wealth, ourselves, and each other if we can better name loss in the new longevity paradigm. I want to be clear. When we talk about longevity, we don't have to belabor the topic of loss, but we do have to name it. Here are 3 ways to normalize loss in the new longevity paradigm, and we can all play a role. First, let's get curious about loss. Consider conducting some market research in your spheres of influence, your household, your family, your community, your organization. What kinds of losses are people sitting with? What have those losses meant for people? How have they shifted how people think about and plan for longer lives? The more we can actually explore the extent to which our losses create meaning and shift how we think about the future, the more we can connect with each other, and truly the more we can gain. Second, we can prepare ourselves and others for loss. Things like long-term care insurance and estate planning services require that we stare loss right in the face. And so a lot of people put off doing it for that reason. Would you believe me if I told you that 90% of people over the age of 50 in the United States say, yes, it's important to have a valid will. And yet only about 50% of people in the United States over the age of 50 actually have one. Would you believe me if I told you that about 50% of people age 45 and older in the US say, I worry about dying unexpectedly. And yet about 30% of people actually have an advanced directive. What's going on there? If we can better name loss when we talk about longevity, we can be better prepared for our own losses in the future. And those can be the greatest gifts to the living. Third, we can respond to loss with authenticity. In the wake of a loss of any kind, many people don't know what to say, or they worry that they're going to make a loss feel even bigger, so they don't say anything. But I can tell you in my experience that by not naming loss, we're not making it smaller. We may actually be making it bigger. My guess is, even if you don't know what to say, simply saying, I've been thinking about you, and I don't know exactly what to say right now, but I want you to know that my heart is with you. Whatever feels authentic to you, it will be gratefully received. Here's what I will leave you with. Those buses that came for Libby, they've come for you, and they've come for me too. And there will be more. But I can tell you this. I feel my daughter in the wind. I see her when I look outside and see a tree growing that we planted in her memory. I see her when I look up and see a perfect puffy cloud in the sky. I look up and I whisper, "Hi, sweet girl. Mama loves you." Can you relate? My guess is that you can. And you know why? Is because here's what I know. Your grief and my grief are very, very old friends. The more we can name loss in the new longevity paradigm, the better we can navigate longevity's twists and turns. Let's commit together to a new longevity paradigm, one in which we can acknowledge the amazing opportunities that come with longer lives and honor the deep losses. Thank you.